Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating framework by author Zhu Feng. He's attempting to prove a deeply debated, almost taboo metaphysical concept, the existence of hell. But, and here's the twist, instead of relying on ancient religious dogmas or fire and brimstone preaching, we're actually going to use cold, hard logic, math, and philosophy to make the case. So, does hell actually exist? It's the ultimate existential question, right? But the approach we're looking at today completely avoids emotional appeals. Instead, it translates abstract reasoning into a highly accessible, structured framework. It's honestly a brilliant mental exercise. Whether you're coming at this from a scientific, philosophical, or spiritual background, the text basically asks us to check our preconceptions at the door and just follow a chain of pure logic. Feng establishes this incredibly bold premise right out of the gate. He argues that asking if hell exists is literally the exact same thing as asking if the soul exists. By tying these two concepts together, the framework clearly signals that we're going to explore the invisible world with the exact same analytical rigor we use for our physical reality. To decode these 8 different deductions, we've grouped them into 4 overarching clusters. We'll start with the math of hell, then move on to cosmic balance, explore justice and earthly suffering, and finally, look at ecological necessity. Cluster 1, the math of hell. Let's get right into it. Now, I know some of you might already associate math with hell, but the framework actually grounds this concept in the physical law of energy balance. In physics, action and reaction forces are always equal and opposite. So if we view heaven as a positive action force and hell as a negative reaction force, together they have to equal 0. 1 plus -1 equals 0. To prevent violating the fundamental energy laws of the universe, a negative counterweight absolutely has to exist. Think back to a standard 3D coordinate system from geometry class. You've got your positive quadrant, right? X, Y, and Z. The framework designates this positive space as heaven. But structurally, any coordinate system inherently requires an opposing negative quadrant, -X, -Y, and -Z, just to balance the whole thing out. In this purely mathematical argument, that negative space is precisely where hell resides. Moving on to Cluster 2, Philosophy of Cosmic Balance. For the third deduction, the text introduces the Eastern principle of Taiji. According to this concept, reality is split by a virtual interface that acts as a center point, and the center requires perfectly symmetrical opposites. Basically, everything, and I mean absolutely everything, has an opposite side across this virtual interface. So the crucial point here is that just as up inherently requires down, left requires right, and light requires darkness, these universal pairings are totally non-negotiable. Applying this exact logic, the framework suggests that the existence of a heavenly side across this interface strictly mandates a hellish counterpart. You literally just cannot have one without the other. Expanding on this for the fourth deduction, we look at yin and yang, the ultimate origin of life and death. Because there's a material world and a non-material world, these forces have to be balanced. If heaven acts as the celestial yang, there has to be a foundational yin acting as its symmetrical anchor. And that necessary yin, that's hell. This brings us to the reward and punishment mechanism of the Tao, which demands total, unwavering impartiality. The idea is that perfect people are rewarded in heaven and flawed people are punished in hell. The argument here is that without both of these destinations, the universe just loses its fairness. True impartiality simply cannot exist. Which brings us to Cluster 3, Justice and Earthly Suffering. We all completely understand the concept of financial debt, right? Well, the fifth deduction argues that the law of debt balance is actually a fundamental rule of reality itself. Just as a borrower has to repay borrowed money, a profound moral debt, something as extreme as taking a life, demands a repayment of equal weight. And this forces a really compelling question. If a person accumulates countless moral debts over their lifetime and then dies without ever paying them, how are they held accountable? If there's no realm of punishment, evildoers basically escape consequence entirely. And if they escape, well, ultimate justice just does not exist. Therefore, to validate the very existence of justice, hell has to exist as the ultimate mechanism for accountability. For the sixth deduction, the framework actually points to visceral, real-world suffering as empirical proof. It cites tragic extremes, like the well-known case of the girl in chains in Fang County, Zhuzhou, or the historical story of Wu Zixu, whose sheer anguish supposedly turned his hair white overnight. Because these truly hellish conditions manifest so tangibly right here in our physical world, the logic argues that they're reflecting the broader, universal reality of hell. Now for our final group, Cluster 4, the ecological necessity. Think about the law of ecological balance. We know nature requires immense diversity, animals, plants, soil, water, just to survive. Well, applying this macro lens to the entire universe, the framework catalogs a dizzying array of entities. We're talking everything from the greatest creator, gods and angels, all the way down the spectrum to mortals, domestic animals, and yes, ghosts. And this raises a highly practical, almost simple question about universal ecology. If every single creature requires a specific habitat to maintain balance, a fish needs water, a bird needs the sky, then where exactly do the darker entities like ghosts and demons reside? The conclusion? In hell, of course. It's simply a required ecological niche. Just like the ocean exists to hold marine life, hell is viewed here as a structural necessity designed to house specific darker entities, basically keeping them from disrupting the rest of the universal ecosystem. So synthesizing all 8 of these deductions, we see this impartial framework that doesn't preach at you, but rather constructs a meticulously balanced universe. From the mathematical zero sum of positive and negative energy, to the philosophical mirror of Taiji and Yang-Yang, right down to the moral necessity of justice and the ecological requirement for habitats. In this view, hell isn't merely a threat used to scare people. It's a required, load-bearing pillar that's literally holding up the architecture of reality. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this to ponder. Regardless of what your personal beliefs might be, this framework fundamentally challenges how we view balance. Does the very architecture of existence, our physics, our morality, our ecology, absolutely demand a dark mirror to reflect the light? Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.